My name is Meg Tuohey. Together we'll gather wisdom from a wide range of voices, thought leaders and seekers just like you. Through individual stories, we'll explore multiple categories of wisdom and uncover how the stripes of our experiences, both joyful and challenging and all that lies in between, intertwine to create a rich tapestry of life. So whether you're looking for inspiration, guidance, or simply a moment of reflection, you're in the right place. This is Wisdom Stripes. Today on Wisdom Stripes, we're thrilled to welcome Parker, an inspiring individual whose journey reflects resilience, curiosity, and a deep commitment to self-discovery. Parker's experiences in navigating life's challenges have fostered a unique perspective on personal growth and empowerment, reminding us that our stories are both a source of strength and a wellspring of wisdom. Join us as we explore Parker's insights on overcoming obstacles, embracing change, and stepping confidently into one's purpose. Parker, welcome to Wisdom Stripes, where we are your no-nonsense, fierce fairy godparents, turning pain and confusion into clarity and confidence. We are so very lucky to have you on our show.
Thank you for hosting. Super excited about this. It's going to be fun.
I think it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be real fun. Okay. So Parker, to start, could you share one piece of wisdom that you hope our listeners take away from your journey today?
You know, in everything I've been through, and I'm sure we'll get deeper into this story, but with community, life's really good. And without community, it gets really hard. And when I say community, I think a lot of people are like, hey, I live in a big city, got all these people on social media. But what I've come to learn about community is there's a big difference between being surrounded by people and actually being connected to people.
So you're talking to the converted. I love community. I curate a community. I lead a community, and I belong to a community. Because when you inspire a community, what you start to realize is that it's like that figure 8 symbol. So not only do you give the container and maybe set the culture and lead by example, but you receive from all the people who co-create with you. And so it's the giving and the receiving of community, of people that are either like-minded or maybe not like-minded, but still committed to the same values, where you get to have that experience of belonging and being cared for whilst also caring about others. I'm really curious about your community. Where did that come from and what's important to you?
Yeah. Well, it's been a long journey to come to that realization. So maybe I'll go back and rewind in my story and share that. And I think it showcases why communities become so important to me. So I grew up in an interesting way. On one hand, it was really great. I had loving parents, grew up in an upper middle class family, was supported to do the things that I wanted to do in life. But then on the other hand, I was surrounded by abuse, by addiction. And I feel like that embodied a lot of my life. It was like on one hand, really good. On the other hand, pretty tough. And all that confusion as a boy led to not knowing to do with those feelings. And by age 12, I was drinking every weekend. And that evolved. And by my late teens and into my early 20s, drinking was also with drugs every weekend. And early 20s, I'm out at Coachella Music Festival. And I just went crazy. I thought it was DiCaprio on Wolf of Wall Street. It was just like absolutely wild. And I came back from that weekend and I had treated myself so poorly that I sat down at the computer and Googled, how do you fix your brain after doing too many drugs? And Google said back to meditate.
That's what Google said?
That's what Google said.
What year was this?
Oh man, this would have been like 2016.
Google knew to meditate?
That's what it told me to do, meditate.
I believe you. I think I like that.
Yeah, well, it changed my life. I started meditating that day and have done pretty much every day since.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So that was an initial turning point for me, where I was like, okay, time to clean things up. It got me super into personal growth, um, super into looking at life differently.
Mm,
And I had started my first business when I was 18, but it wasn't working.
mm,
Not a big surprise why. And my business was starting to work for the first time too. As I kept investing in myself, got plugged into some amazing communities, and things started taking off.
mhm.
Business started blowing up. Was doing first it was not working, then doing millions, then doing multiple millions, then doing eight figures. Um, got clean and sober, got into a relationship, got in the best shape of my life, systematized the business, was working 5 hours a week from the beach. Um, looking from the outside in, it looked like I had made it.
Yeah, I can feel something though. Something's
Yeah, yeah,
coming,
something's
isn't it?
coming. Something's
Something's
coming.
coming.
Yeah. And I had essentially created this life that I thought would make me feel good.
Yeah.
It's like all the things that I'm supposed to do, right? It's this is what a successful man is, right? He's got all this stuff. And turns out it didn't solve it. I was on one of my many, many vacations. I was pretty much traveling full time at that point. And I was actually down here in Florida. I was on a vacation in West Palm Beach, and I was staying at this hotel. It was about 20 stories high, and there's a pool up at the top. I was leaning over the balcony, looking at the ocean, and then I looked down for a second, and there's this voice in the back of my head that says, "Maybe you should jump." I slowly back away from the edge because I didn't trust myself in that moment. I just sat against the wall on the other side of the building, and I was just like, "What's going on? How, like, you have everything you thought you wanted, and yet this?" And as I started exploring, like, what's actually going on here? Like, why do I feel so off? I realized I had made a lot of compromises in my rush to success because I thought success was going to solve the problem. So if I got to sweep some stuff under the rug and ignore this and ignore that, ignore the fact that my relationship, the little things at the beginning, sweep that under the rug because I get married, I want to have kids, I want to do the thing. Little things in the business. Oh, I don't like this part and that part, and there's some things off with this business dynamic and that. No, just sweep it under the rug. Got to make the money. And that was the epitome of what my life had been. It was how do I rush to get the external thing while ignoring the compromises I'm making along the way. And as I peeled that back, I'm like, oh, this is not good. Found out the girl I was engaged to was cheating. That was really tough.
Mhm.
Um, said no to the next big real estate deal. Moved countries. Started fresh. So I remember there was a moment I was just sitting there. It was like an internal point of I said to myself, no more bullshit. It's just like enough's enough. And started doing things differently. Started really seeking something else. And this kind of bringing it full circle to community. I was so confused how I had gotten into so many good communities, like spending all this money to be around some of the best in the world in the personal development space. And it's working for my business. It's working for external results, certainly. But how did I have no one in my life that was like, hey, man, like, are you doing okay in your relationship? Like, it's not like there wasn't warning signs. Hey, man, are you really happy with your business? It's not like there wasn't warning signs, but it was like I was surrounded by all these people, but not actually connected to anybody deep enough that we could have that conversation and I could be supported through the real challenges I was facing, even though my life looked good externally.
Mm.
And when I realized that, I'm like, oh, well, maybe if I couldn't find it, it needs to be created. And that's how I created Results Club, which is the community of entrepreneurs that I lead. Essentially, How do you build something incredible? How do you build something big in terms of entrepreneurship, but do that without compromising your values, without stressing yourself out? How do you do it? How do you have the external and the internal instead of compromising one for the other?
One of my favorite things to talk about is how we need to build our internal life so that we can have the internal experience of our relationship with self and have it match kind of our heart print on the outside.
Hmm.
And that is like a big journey. It's a long
Yep.
path. It's a dedicated path of attunement to self and belonging to self and respect for self and your humanity and the humanness that it is to exist in this world. And it is like a lovely walk kind of home. Has that been your experience or is it something different?
Well, it feels a lot better than the old way of doing things. But I'm also not in a position or I'm not under the delusion that I've completely done it either. And I think that's the problem I was falling into before. I'm like, I got it all figured out. It's like anytime I notice myself saying I got it all figured out, I'm like, big red warning
Because
signs.
you never get it done.
No, you're always getting it done.
Right? And you never get it right. You
Yeah.
might have moments where it lines up and you're like, it doesn't last. It's not meant to
Yeah,
last.
you can't take your success and put it on the shelf and say it's done. It's a
It's not
daily
done.
investment.
It's a daily conversation, a daily relationship.
Yes. Yes,
Yes.
it is.
I love that. Okay. So out of what you have built and out of what pain you've had where you've alchemized that into creating the community that you have, what's the thing that your community is most, I feel like words like hungry or malnourished, when they come to you, what's the type of experience this community has had that has had them come and find you?
You know, it's always fun trying to answer that question because it's like I'm asking that to myself every day because I want to bring more people in to have the experience and help them experience the transformation that I've had and that other people in my community have had. And I noticed that people that are experiencing what I was experiencing are so deep into it because they're smart people, they're capable people, they're winning on a lot of levels, and they created a lot of that success in order to cover up the fact that they didn't feel like they were winning internally before they started. They felt a hole, they felt a missing,
Mm.
and I think what they need to hear is that it's okay that you have people that love you, that you don't have to put on the facade to be enough. But I don't think they want to hear that yet. I think they need this subtle invitation into something that feels more familiar. And then to be surrounded by actual healthy community that slowly shines the light so brightly on them that it gives them permission to say, oh, maybe something is off. Maybe I do have a feeling in here that this isn't working quite the way I want. Maybe it's okay to admit that I'm scared or that my relationship doesn't feel healthy or that my business isn't working. And I try to do whatever I can. That's why I'm doing podcasts like this to invite in. And a lot of the time, the conversation starts with business or starts with success. But that's why I add the success without stress or compromise, because most people I'm talking to know deep down there's a little bit of, mm, maybe I feel things are off. Maybe I have been making some compromises. I do feel stressed. Even if I'm not working that many hours, I still do feel stressed. What's going on? And it's just that subtle chipping away at the awareness before they kind of are ready to be like, oh, okay, I get it. For me, I've experienced it to be a very gentle journey that
Mhm.
people need to go on in
Mm.
order to really open up and be part of a community.
So there's kind of two words that are coming to mind, and I wonder if you resonate with these on behalf of your community. One is it sounds like you build a sense of safety and embodied safety in not just yourself, but in other leaders or members of your community. And the other one is acclimate. It's time to acclimate in. which is bit by bit, piece by piece, until it feels safe enough, like, and known. So I understand the community, and I therefore have realized that it is safe, and I've maybe tested that safety, and I've realized I might be able to take some of my
Yes.
armor, my heart armor off.
Yeah.
Is that what it's like?
I think, yeah, you're definitely speaking to a sounds really accurate to me. Um, a lot of the people I work with are leaders. And I think in a lot of rooms, leaders feel like they need to lead. It's like, I, I think a lot of people that I work with walk into a room and they're like, this doesn't quite seem like it's working. I better get it to work. And when you have that feeling of like, I'm in charge here, sometimes it doesn't feel safe to be like, okay, let me take off this armor. Let me take off this responsibility and share what I'm going through. And I think in most rooms, leaders feel like they need to put on the leadership hat. And sometimes leaders don't know how to wear the leadership hat and the vulnerability hat. They don't know how to take it on and off. And what my goal is to create something that, hey, we're all leaders. It's safe to take that leadership hat off for a second
Mm.
and say, hey, here's me. This is what's going on. This is what I'm facing.
Mm.
It's like, sure, these things are great and I'm really grateful. And this part doesn't feel great.
Mm.
What should I do about it? What do you guys think?
Mm.
I think a lot of people lack a space, especially leaders, especially high performers. And I think even in my experience, even more so for men because they've been trained to not feel, to shut down, that's not what masculinity is, to ever ask for help.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it doesn't mean you're not a man anymore. It doesn't mean you're not going to be successful. It doesn't mean that the leadership hat isn't still there and you don't have to sometimes go do the work. But here's a space where you can do something else and get clearer, get more connected. So when you go do the work, there's a different level of purpose, there's a different level of potency behind it. And in my experience, it creates a lot more internal fulfillment and actually creates a lot better results, the thing you were chasing after the whole time anyway.
Okay. So, one of the things that's on my mind as I think about your beautiful good men in your community is their experience of leadership and feeling like they're the ones that need to lead, and the nuance that you're starting to build some muscle in, which is there's a time for giving leadership and a time for receiving leadership, and being able to find some balance in both of those spaces and to be able to tolerate the distress of putting down the leadership and being in the space of receiving. I wonder if we might talk about how you build the muscle, or what it, maybe you have different language for it,
Yeah.
but how you build the muscle of distress around vulnerability. I think vulnerability is a word that's overused. So maybe receiving support, receiving care, receiving love, receiving connection without them having to earn it in inverted commas by being the leader.
Hmm.
Can we talk about that?
What I've found is the best leaders are often the best followers. And when I tell guys that, and a lot of people come to me wanting to grow a business way bigger and they get stuck because they get stuck on the art of leading a team. They know how to put it all on their shoulders, but I got to now lead a team. And I'm asking for leadership help, but I haven't learned how to follow yet. And there's this friction. And when I start explaining it that way, it's like, oh, well, if I need to do this to get to the thing that I think will solve it, because a lot of people still think that the solve is if I get the business bigger, if I get the thing to work, if I become a better leader, I'll finally solve all my problems. And in that journey, they realize that a lot of what they were actually looking for was, oh, it's safe to put down the leadership hat. Like other people are competent, other people can like support me. And once they get a taste of that, especially around other people who actually have the capacity to support them, the capacity to hold the safety where they can be like, yeah, this is what's going on for me. They start to get it. Cause I think once you get a taste of it, you start to get it. And that's why I do all the events that I do. It's because I think this is so well experienced in a room. Like
Hmm.
you can cultivate like the culture of a community when you can taste it in person, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is different.
Oh, this is what this feels like.
There's a settling that happens for them.
I can't help but feel like the two words that I want to share that I'm reading from the work that you're doing in your community. And maybe it's when they originally come, or maybe it's longer. I'm not sure. It feels like there's a loneliness,
Mhm.
and it also feels like there's a weightiness, alone with the weight of maybe being a man. Obviously, I'm a woman. I don't understand what that's like. But the weightiness of what's on my shoulders and the like nothing behind me and or no one beside me. Is that what it's like? The is that what you're working on?
Mm. Yeah, well, I got goosebumps as you said it, so I think you're on the exact mark of what they're dealing with. And weightiness is definitely the right word. I think that most men I've led in or I've met in leadership positions feel this burden. It's like I've got people to take care of, I got a family to take care of, I've got a team to lead, got people to serve. There's issues in the world and I feel like I'm supposed to do something about them. And there's all this pressure to perform,
Yeah.
and there's rarely a space where they can take that off. It's like the picture I often get is like Atlas with the weight of the world on his
Yeah.
shoulders.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey man, you don't got to carry that all on your own.
So the thing that also strikes me, which you haven't said, so I might be reading something that's not here, is that it feels like maybe the elders, the male elders of the community, are perhaps not as equipped to help lead younger generations through this changing time. Is that the case or no? Hey there, Meg Tuohey here with a quick and exciting announcement. As a psychologist, coach, and founder of the Wisdom Lab, I've had the privilege of helping thousands of individuals break free from the vicious cycles holding them back and tap into their infinite inner wisdom. If you're tired of feeling unheard, unseen, and stuck in the same old struggles, the Wisdom Lab is the breakthrough you've been yearning for. This on demand program guides you through a powerful process to shatter emotional barriers, overcome deep rooted blocks, and experience the profound transformation you deserve. In just 4 hours, you'll gain the tools and insights to revolutionize your life from the inside out. Want to learn more? Click or tap the link in the show notes for all the details. Okay, now back to the episode.
Um, yeah, I think there's a missing in today's leadership, missing in today's masculine leadership for sure. There's a
Up the chain or in general?
both. Yeah,
Up the chain in age is where I'm
yeah.
going.
I think both end. I think that up the chain in age, I see a lot of good men,
Yeah.
but I also see a lot of men who are pretty uncomfortable with their emotions.
Yes. Born into a different context, a different time.
Yes, exactly. And don't get me wrong, there's a time and place for a man to put his emotions aside and get to it.
So, as there is for a woman.
Yes. And yet, if you never ask what's going on, a metaphor I use a lot of the time to explain this to the guys I'm leading is we have these different parts of ourselves. Call it the inner wise man, 15-year-old, and the 5-year-old. And we all have this inner wise man, but we often think we're trying to be him when we're actually being a 15-year-old. We're just armoring up, putting our head through the brick wall and getting it done. But we also have an inner 5-year-old. I was once talking to a really successful guy. He said he once visualized killing off his inner child.
Yeah. Right. You just want to,
I know, right?
I know.
And I explained to him, hey man, you can't kill that off. It just pushes it deeper into your subconscious. It's like taking that inner part of yourself and locking in the basement.
Hmm.
And then what happens is that part starts freaking out.
Hmm.
It's almost like Bruce Banner turning into the Hulk.
Yeah. Well,
Angry. And what comes out often, especially if you're a person who's got a lot of capacity to succeed in life, is it leaks out. it doesn't like actively come out with emotion. It leaks out in usually numbing behaviors, drugs, alcohol, porn, at whatever's on the list, too much TV, scrolling on the phone, too much food, all these habits that you're like, I know I shouldn't do that, but I can't, or everyone deserves advice, right? It's like these excuses we give ourselves because we don't know how to manage our emotions. So instead, what do? You just let it leak out. You let your energy leak out
Mm,
into things that are unhealthy for you and often destructive for you and the people you say you love.
mhm,
And a lot of the time I'm talking about potency, and leaders need potency if they're going to lead. That's where all your potency is going. Is if you're disconnected emotionally and you're putting that 5-year-old in the basement and it's leaking out into all these numbing behaviors, you have no energy to actually lead with.
mhm,
And then the people are wondering why they're struggling with leadership and people following. So
mhm,
there's a fundamental missing.
mhm,
And you can, the only solution to that, if you want to stay in a leadership position and you're not willing to face the emotions, is to get super mechanical about it. How do I make these tight control systems and everything's got all these rules and structures,
mhm,
and you can just feel the heaviness of it.
mhm.
And I think that there's a bit of a missing in terms of the emotional connection from our elder leadership. And then you can feel it down through the system of like they're good men with good hearts, but nobody taught them how to do this.
Of course, they're good men, good hearts. Of course, they are.
Yeah.
So we have a shared thing that you don't know about yet,
Okay.
but now I just figured it out while we were talking. So I work with women and I run a program and I call them my wise women and you call them your wise men. Isn't that the sweetest
That's
thing you've ever heard?
fantastic.
We didn't know that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
How beautiful. Okay. So let's go to potency. Okay. Potency is, would you mind operationalizing that word? What do you mean by potency?
I think in simple terms, it's the ability to get things done. But getting things done happens in a lot of different ways. And sometimes it takes a long time and it's very drawn out and it's very like formulaic.
Mhm.
And I think potency gets rid of a lot of the noise of having to like micromanage your way to outcomes.
Mm.
And it's just like done
Mm.
because there's an energy behind it. And I think a lot of people are trying to achieve results in their life, in any of area of their life, with all these tactics and strategies and
Mm.
micromanagement instead of having enough potency to just do it.
So potency doesn't sound like it's flow. It sounds like it is a state, though. So, could we do some more words
Yes.
around the state of potency?
Yes.
So, if you are meeting someone new for the first time and they're like, hey, man, like, I don't understand potency. Do I have potency or did I just not get some? And do you have it all? Like, does everyone have potency? Tell me about that.
Yeah. That's a great question. Everybody has potency. I don't think everybody's connected to their potency. And potency is related to your emotions and it's related to your energy. And somebody told me a long time ago that emotion is energy in motion. And if our emotions are stuck, it's hard to have potency. It doesn't flow through you. Like it is related to flow, but it's not the same as flow.
Mm.
If your emotions are not flowing, and most people, I think, and especially most high performing men have learned to just shut off their emotions and just go do the work. But emotion is required for potency because you need that energy flowing.
Mhm.
And the challenge is of explaining this to guys all the time is that emotions operate on a scale of 0 to 100. 50 is in the middle, and most guys don't want to experience anything below 50. I want to experience any of the lows. So they don't experience the highs because what they don't realize is emotions work on a polarity, almost like a battery, positive, negative pull. And if you got a big battery, it has a lot of tension between the two poles. Most guys aren't willing to go any lower than 48. It's like, oh, I can feel a little bit of bad stuff, a little bit of anger, a little bit of sadness, a little bit of grief, a little bit of, I feel a little bit. Therefore, I only get a little bit on the high side. And therefore, my battery is tiny. I got this little incy wincy battery. And therefore, I have no potency. And as you start opening that up, your willingness to feel, whether that be on the quote unquote negative side, which actually isn't a negative thing, or on the positive side, the openness to feel, all of a sudden you're cultivating this energy. And that energy can be directed wherever you consciously direct it. And that's that state of energy is flowing, therefore I can direct it. And it's like a light bulb versus a laser beam. Light bulb can light up a room, you plug into the same thing to a laser beam and it can cut steel. Laser has potency, has it on and it's focused. And those are the two elements of potency. We just talked about turning the energy up, but then the other part is focusing it. Where are you aiming the potency? And that's a whole different mechanism of it, but that's the two pieces.
So potency is also range. You need to have access to a range of the human condition, which requires distress tolerance, being able to sit in feelings that are uncomfortable and unfamiliar, whether they're negative or positive. Because I think there's just as much vulnerability in the helpless and the hopeless and the sad and the angry and the feelings that live down that end of the emotional spectrum. And it's also as uncomfortable sometimes to feel heightened states of joy and love.
Sure.
They're both as sometimes as confronting as each other. So sometimes I think we like to live in the middle where it's stable and predictable. But then, of course, we're limiting our range. We're limiting our ability to grow into people who can tolerate the feelings that move through our body. Because, like you say, emotions are energy in motion, but also they're energetic. Let me try that word again. They are data points for our beautiful brains to make sense of the environment we're in. So if you only have small data points to work with, you're actually kind of like a horse with blinkers on because the range is too small.
Yes.
You're missing the attunement to the bigger picture. And therefore, maybe you do have support around you, but you can't see it the same way.
Yes.
And maybe you do have more potency than you've realized because your blinkers are in your range.
Yes.
I wonder if that's something that fits in your experience.
Yeah, very much so. Topic I love talking about with people. They often don't love hearing it, but I think it's one of the most important things. I think it's one of the biggest things I was missing when my life wasn't working is human beings are very capable of lying to themselves.
Yes.
Fall into self-deception all the time. Like I don't, it's so uncomfortable to look at it. I'm going to pretend it doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like completely out of awareness. And when you talked about blinders, it made me think of just like, I'm blind to everything else. It's not that it's not there. And in fact, a lot of the times I'm the one who put on the blinders, but it's so uncomfortable for me to feel that, to look at that, to admit that I'm just going to pretend it doesn't exist.
I'm going to stay in the range that my beautiful brain has deemed safe.
Yes, exactly that. Concept I love sharing is the 4 F's of fear. And most people know fight and flight, maybe freeze. Most people don't talk about fawn.
Or flop.
I don't even know that one.
I'll
So
teach you
now
that
there's
one.
5s.
Let's do, you
fantastic.
do fawn, I'll do flop.
Fantastic.
Actually, I'm literally not going to flop, but because I'm so yeah, let's talk fawn.
Okay. My experience of fawn is just like a child. Like fawn is like Bambi in the movie Bambi. It's a kid. It's a baby. And babies just go along with whatever's happening. They don't have responsibility to the circumstances or the situation. And here we are, grown adults, often fawning to different parts of our life, pretending that we're not responsible, pretending that it's not happening. Oh no, it's like, I can't do anything. But it's so much I can't do anything that I just literally block it out of awareness. It's like, oh, that's, meanwhile, my life's slowly crumbling around me and I'm not paying attention to it. This is where I was at. even though I was quite successful in a lot of areas on the external, I
Mhm.
was fawning to all the problems that I'd rather sweep under the rug.
Mm. So my definition of fawning is that, and I also use some other ways. Maybe it's because of the group that
Hmm.
I work with. Fawning, we often see as a trauma response,
Absolutely.
and same with you. And so that is also a way we would describe it is um, smoothing so that the problem goes away with other people.
Mm.
And so women in relationships where perhaps there's power and control imbalances, that kind of thing, we often see fawning, or where there's high levels of trauma, where we just can't have
Absolutely.
something go wrong. So we are like overly rescuing a
Yes.
situation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly my experience of it and how I look at it. And it
Yeah.
can happen between people and
Yes.
it can happen within yourself because we
Yes.
all have you have a relationship with yourself.
Sure
And you
do.
can be smoothing over so much that you're literally lying to yourself.
Yes.
And that can get into really tough territory.
It sure can. Do you want me to tell you about flop?
Please do.
This is a funny story.
Okay.
So we're going to a
There we
funny
go.
place.
Fantastic.
Okay?
I'm excited for it.
Sorry in advance to my brother-in-law. So in my married family, into the family I married into, flop is like a thing that is common. So flop in terms of the scientific form is when you have fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Fight is like the one that you do first. So it's like, I think I can fight you and win because you're a threat to me. Flight is, I can't fight you, but I might be able to outrun you. So I'm going to go. Um, Fight, flight, freeze is, I'm in real trouble here. The best I can do is stand really still and try not to be noticed. Fawn is, I'm in real trouble here. How can I smooth this to make it go away? Because I can be seen. And flop is, I'm really in trouble here. The only way that I'm going to maybe save myself is if I pass out and flop to the ground. If I lose consciousness, good luck to me. That's the only thing I've got left to do. And it is in my family of origin, well, that I married into. We have my beautiful brother in law who got bitten by a fish with like teeth when he was fishing. Do you know what a tinny is?
No, I don't know what that
It's
is.
an
Sounds
Australian
like a
word.
scary Australian fish.
It's no, a tinny is the boat.
It's
It's one of those little boats that don't
oh,
have.
it's a little. It's a,
What is an American word for that
uh,
or a Canadian word? It's a
it's like an
small
aluminum boat, a small aluminum boat.
aluminum.
Yeah,
I think you mean aluminium.
yeah. There you go. Exactly.
So they were out off Darwin, which is like the top of Australia.
Yeah.
They'd gone out an hour in an aluminum boat and they were catching big fish.
Yeah.
And this fish they caught and it came over into the tinny
Uh-huh.
and it had teeth. And my beautiful brother in law thought that the fish was the poisonous kind. And so when he was wearing flip flops, so when the fish bit him through the toe, he's like quickly calculated, I'm an hour boat ride in my tinny to a place where there's a 4-hour drive to a regional hospital. I'm 5 hours from help, and this fish has just bitten me on the toe, and I think its fangs, because I had big, big teeth,
Yeah.
are venomous. I think I'm going to die. And he flopped. His body was like, best thing to do to keep this person alive is to slow everything right down and have him go unconscious.
Wow.
And so, and that is a real thing. That is not
Yeah.
just a family kind of piece of the puzzle. That's like a real thing.
Wow.
Yeah. So
There
you
we
can
go.
add that into
The
your
fifth F of fear.
5 F's for you, my friend. You get an F and you get an F.
Oh man.
I know. So how about that? Have you ever had any of your men flop on you?
Oh my
Doesn't
goodness.
sound very helpful, does it?
Well, sometimes when I take people skydiving, they want to flop, I
Right?
think.
Because it's close to that edge of will I survive this?
Yes.
Yeah. And maybe we should talk about survival. Maybe we should talk about, we have touched on this a little bit, but beautiful brains and people do think sometimes that, will I be able to make it through this life context? Will I actually, am I actually going to be able to do this? Because sometimes it feels insurmountable.
Yeah.
And I notice a lot in the work that I do that it's common for women to say, I see this thing that I've got to grow into. I don't know if it's possible. I actually don't know if I can do it. Will I survive this? Will I actually, if I walk into this fire or across this path, am I going to be all right? How do I know that? Do you notice that in your community as well?
I think that we're always wrestling with survival. I think anytime fear's coming up, we have some level of wrestling with survival. And it's just us choosing which type of wrestle we're choosing. We might be just flopping if in the worst cases. We might be fawning to it and just kind of going along with it. We might be
Yeah.
freezing. And what I see a lot for people to freeze in life is not an actual freeze. They go up in their head.
Mm,
Think, 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 think. They think they're doing something. Meanwhile, they're actually not doing anything. They're thinking about doing something. They're
mm,
thinking about doing something, not doing something,
mm,
while pretending they're doing lots. It's how a lot of people end up with burnout. Think, 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 and do nothing.
mm. And your particular cohort of men,
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneurs, are usually intelligent people,
Lots.
perhaps even gifted.
Yes.
So that is like their brain is their strength.
Yeah.
And when we overuse our strengths, they become our shadows.
Yes.
And so rumination is overthinking, and it's that disconnect between that kind of heart and head coherence that it sounds like you're helping guide people back home to.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the time I often tell people the smarter you are, the better you are at lying to yourself, because you're taking this big tool set that you have, this big capacity, and you're afraid. So it's hijacked by the fear. And therefore, you're now using all that superpower of thinking and creativity and influence on yourself to trick yourself into things that aren't true. And I see this all the time. I'm thinking and coming up with a plan. Oh, this is why I'm doing it. Or then you get into flight. And how I often see flight for people is avoidance. It's like I know what I'm supposed to be doing. There's a old saying, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek.
What was the first part of that?
The cave you fear to enter holds the
The
treasure you
cave you
seek.
fear to enter holds the treasure.
You seek. Yes.
That was worth slowing down. That was very good. Please continue.
Yes, that's one of my favorite sayings. It's actually a guideline in my community. I'm always bringing us back to that statement. The cave I fear to enter holds the treasure I seek. Okay, what's that mean? Why do we say that? Because so often we get a glimpse of the cave and we say, I'm not going in there. So let me get busy with all this other stuff.
Don't you know how busy I am?
Exactly. We're bit.
Have you not seen this empire I am building? I don't have time for the cave. I'm building
Exactly.
the
I'm
thing.
busy. I'm building
very busy over
things.
here.
And that's what I see like a really competent creative person doing in flight.
Mm,
They're not running away consciously. They're pretending that all the other stuff needs to be done, because if they admitted what they actually needed to do, they'd be like, oh, that's scary. They're not ready to fight, do the fight in the cave
mm,
and hopefully break through into a level of, and I often talk about the other side, the side of faith,
mm,
which is starts with courage. This is the model I use. Starts with courage, gives way to release. Release gives way to mastery, and mastery gives way to play. And that's the other side. I'll often draw it as two circles, four F's of fear, and then the side of faith. We go through it, and it's almost like an infinity loop. And here's the thing most people don't realize. Once you get to play, that's at that level of the game. You're still fawning to the next level of the game once you get up there.
There's an initiation to
It's
the
a
next
never-ending
level.
journey.
You never get it done, and you've got to go back through the initiation into the next level of identity that you crave to grow into. You crave it because it's your next heart mission. Yeah,
Yes.
'cause
Yes.
you're always blooming. That's your
Mm-hmm.
job.
Yes.
Keep on blooming.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So for those people that are out there listening to this and they're like, I'm going to give you the yeah buts. Yeah, but Parker, you don't understand. I am actually really busy
Yeah.
and this is really hard and I don't know where to start and I don't have access to being able to live in a different way. It's all well and good for you to run this thing over here, but for whatever reason, I can't do that thing with you. And what am I supposed to do? I'm here in my small town, way, way, way away from accessing a community or a life like this. Where do I start?
You know, my heart goes out to people who are having that conversation because I get it. I was from the small town. I'm from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada.
I just want to hear you say that again.
Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. That's where I'm from.
That's it's like poetic.
And like, I get that it doesn't feel easy from that place.
Mm.
Um, it wasn't easy, but also, in my experience, no one's coming to save you in that place. And I had to wait for multiple rock bottom moments to wake me up out of my unwillingness to save myself. And I've come to realize that we all get to choose our rock bottom. And like we were just talking about, there is no stopping. You can think it's done. You think you can maintain. You can't. You're either growing or dying. You're going in one direction or the other. And I think a lot of people haven't had the hard conversation. No one's had the hard conversation with them, and they haven't had the hard conversation with themselves of like, well, I can't do it. It's like maybe it feels that way, but I promise you that if you go seeking, you will find what you're looking for.
Let's do a pre-agreed addendum.
Mm-hmm.
Just check if you like this. What if we've got to phrase the question differently? What if like I can't do it, but maybe what if this does work? What if me taking a step does work? That for me feels like maybe it would feel to somebody who doesn't know where to start, like, what if I can trust myself to take the next step? What if I can find the next right thing, which actually changes my life by 1%? And what if then I feel really good and notice and appreciate that about my decision? And then what if I find the next step? What if I let today be the day that I decide? Would you think that would work or would you adjust that in any way?
No, I love it. I think it feels like a beautiful, softer, gentler approach. And I think people, depending on where they're at, they need, like, I call it the hug and the kick in the ass. And often we need both. And when I'm talking about leadership, I'm often talking like, how do we give a deeper hug while giving a deeper kick in the ass simultaneously? I don't think they're necessarily opposites, but that it's like it feels like we're talking around the same truth from two different sides. The way you just said it versus the way I said it. It's like you've got to do it, but there's a different way of looking at it too. It's like, what if this would work? What if we reframe the question? What if we look at it differently? And no, I love that. There's a giving yourself permission to have hope again. I think when you've been struggling long enough, you start losing hope. And that's when things get really bad and it just keeps sliding until you hit your rock bottom. Eventually life will give that to you. And
There is also no shame in rock bottom.
no,
Rock bottom is just the data that it's time to make a different decision. I have been at rock bottom at least three major times in my life, and all three of them have born a new version of me with a new focus and a new outcome and a new trajectory. And so we sometimes stigmatize rock bottom. We sometimes say, oh, they're at rock bottom, like poor them. But actually, you need to know where your limits are. There's nothing wrong with a limit. What matters is then where you go or what you decide. What's your relationship with rock bottom like?
Hmm. Oh, that's a great question. I've gotten to a point where I've experienced so much pain in them that I have such like a two-way relationship with it. It's
Mm.
like on one hand, it's like, this is the absolute worst thing. I don't want anything to do with rock bottom. Like, please, Parker, be proactive and don't let yourself get there again. And then yet I look back at those moments, I'm like, greatest gifts in my life. Greatest gifts. I would not be who I am without those moments. And that's I think the paradox of life is the things that we are most avoiding are the things that we most need. The things that hurt the most end up being the greatest gifts. And that, because I know that deep down, there's a part of me that's like, okay, I accept if it's coming my way. What I try not to do is engineer them for myself anymore.
No, because they're no.
I think they're gonna come. Life's gonna bring them on its own. I'm trying to like at least not like conscious. If I'm able to, I'm gonna try to avoid them.
But not like under the carpet
But
avoid.
there's a big difference between correct and avoid.
Correct.
And I think that's a good exactly because avoid, it's like
Yeah.
really what I mean by avoid and what I said is more like correct.
Or build your way out before.
Well, and actually how you actually correct them and not have them happen is to not avoid them by sweeping them under the rug.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a philosophy around the bump in the rug, which is that when you sweep things under the carpet, at the beginning, it's just like a
Mhm.
little divot in the rug, and
Yeah.
then eventually it becomes something you like trip over.
Yeah.
And then every time you trip over, you have your reaction to the things that you've swept under there. And it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And eventually you're like stubbing your toe. And what you need to do is pull back the rug and do the work of processing all the things that you swept under there.
Yes.
There's a responsibility we have to ourselves
Yes.
about what we store under the rug, recognizing that all the humans store things under the rug. And eventually that rug is going to get so that you will stub your toe
Yeah.
or trip and fall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you start tripping up everyone around you too. That's where it
Well,
gets.
yes. Well, let's do this bit. This is a fun
Yeah.
bit for us to do. Fun is maybe a relative term. Let's do the bit where you break connection with other people. So let's talk about it from your good men perspective who have their bumps in the rug. And those bumps in the rug have meant that they've broken connection or need to make repairs to a relationship that is important to them that they've harmed. Talk to us about how you work to teach in that space with your good men.
hmm Yeah. I often find one of the biggest breakthroughs a man will have is the willingness to face the relationships that he's been avoiding. And I think a lot of successful guys were chasing after success because they were feeling this lack, this missing. And a lot of the missing was from lack of relationship. And they thought, hey, once I get successful, then I'll finally feel connected to people. And in often cases, it's the opposite. I feel more lonely than ever. And yet, I have a broken relationship with my parents or my brothers or my sisters or my friends or my family or maybe even my children. It's like there's all these broken relationships. And man, does it take a lot of community building before they feel safe enough to start addressing that. But when they do, every time I see it, I, I started like I had the conversation with my dad. I finally did it. See this change that starts happening in their whole life. Their ability to lead themselves changes. Their ability to lead their team changes. The ability to just have peace. It's like there's this because they peeled back the rug. They said, okay, let's pull out one of the big chunks under there. It may not all be gone, but let's start sweeping. Let's start getting it out. And when that starts moving, I see people's lives change like that. Things they've been working on for years, maybe even decades, is gone in like weeks and months when they start doing that work.
Can we full circle this?
Yes.
Is this the type of moment where the range changes? So they might go, I think you were, I don't remember the
Mhm.
plus 50.
Yeah, well, 50 is the middle.
Yeah, I
There's
know.
100 and 0.
I know, but how far do they go towards
Oh, they like
100?
going to maybe 52. Well,
52,
they
48?
they go 52, 48 is kind
Yeah.
of their little zone.
So yeah, that's the I couldn't remember the
Yes.
52. So now we've got 52, 48. They've gone under the rug. They're looking at the break in relationship, whatever that is, whoever that's with. They're taking the action. They've got their kind of community behind them. They've got some new skills. They're leading forward. What kind of range do they reclaim in their ability to experience life?
Yeah. Well, certainly a lot bigger than where they started. And I think it depends on the relationship and it depends on what they did to reconcile that relationship or make peace with that relationship. And I think that journey is a never ending journey as well. There's, I would say, a state, which is like a temporary place I am on that journey versus a stage, which is kind of like my set point on that journey of how big my range is.
Mm,
And I think that you can have a moment where you really open up. I saw this a lot in the personal growth world. People would go to these events that are engineered to open you wide open.
I know those
But
events.
yeah, I went to lots of them. And they're such a gift because I had never opened up like that in my life. So at least I knew it existed, but I didn't have the tools to get there. I had gotten to the state of that space, but I did not know how to build myself into the man who had that stage where I could regularly go there. And the stage requires a practice.
Mm,
So it's one thing to go have the tough conversation with your dad, let's say. It's another thing to be in a practice of having tough conversations in your life regularly where you're opening and opening. And then you have the tough conversation with yourself and open. You have a tough conversation with your team member, you open. You have a tough conversation with your wife, you open. And all of a sudden, you're building this muscle where it's not just a stage that's or a state that somebody helped you get to
mm,
or that you got to in one moment of like, I have to do this,
mm.
but it's now a stage of openness because you can get to that state temporarily and have potency temporarily and have the ability to lead and influence at a different level than you've ever done because you've done all that work. But if it's only temporarily, it's not necessarily that useful. It's just like it's like if I go work out really hard all day long, it doesn't mean I'm going to be in shape for the rest of my life, no matter how good the workout was. And I think a lot of people don't realize this work is very similar to staying in shape. It's like diet and exercise is a lifelong practice. It's not this thing that you're just done.
Like your meditation
Yes,
practice.
exactly.
And so it's about finding ways to honor yourself with the practices that are actually nourishing for your soul or nourishing for your heart, not just that beautiful big brain of yours, you
Hmm.
know? Mm. Now, Parker, unfortunately, we are at the end of our time. So I have one big question left for you. I'm
Hmm.
going to set the scene. It is fall and we are not in Miami. We are where fall happens.
Okay.
Okay. So we have
Back where I'm from.
yes. So we have the change in the trees
Yes.
and the temperature at night drops and it is night. It's like dusk and we're in our comfy chairs and we're in our relaxed clothes. The end of the day, we've got I like lots of different choices of beverages. So it's like whatever drinks you want and however many you want to have. You know, you can have your hot chocolate, you can have a glass of water, you can do whatever you want. You've got whatever it is that you want. There's good snacks. And I'm going to put a fire pit there as well.
Fantastic.
I know. And there's now some extra chairs, and our listeners are here. And you get to share one last thing with our listeners. Now that we all know each other so well, we've got to spend this time together and we really feel like we're all speaking the same language. What's the last thing that you want our also comfy, cozy listeners who have got their exact right clothes and blankets wrapped around them and they're curled up on the chairs that are good for them? What do you want them to know as we close out?
Answering the question, what do I want? And I'd go even deeper and ask it in this way: what am I willing to die for? An old mentor of mine shared this with me. We're already trading our life for what we're currently doing. So, like, to actually answer that question, like, what am I trading it for? And connecting to a vision that is worth making the changes for. Because there's no path out of here that's easy, but there's lots of paths out of here that are worth it. But you got to be connected to answering the question, what do I really want? What's worth it? Because without that, you don't have the fuel to make the changes. And with a deep enough, what do I want? With a deep enough why, you can actually answer the question, what am I willing to die for? The whole world opens up to you because you have the fuel to get there.
When you ask that question, it's like a stillness comes into the room. I wonder, stillness for me is a place where I can find my next right step. Is that sort of the intended experience of asking yourself that question, where you go still because of the shock of the idea of dying? And then you think, what is actually important here? Or is it something that I've totally misjudged and it's got nothing to do with stillness?
I think stillness is the starting point of that, but not necessarily the end point. Like when I say that and when I'm talking to my guys, like I mean, answer that question. What do you love enough you'd be willing to die for? The metaphor I often use to help them start connecting to it is imagine you have a daughter in a third world country and she's traveling and all of a sudden she's put in prison wrongfully. And now you got to go solve that. It's like, what am I willing to die? It's like, I don't care how much money I got. I don't care how much time I have. I don't care how busy I am. I don't care how I don't know how to do it.
I'm
I'm
in.
going to get that done.
I'm in.
And there is a stillness that comes with that because I know, but I've actually answered the question in that moment, what I'd be willing to die for. I'd be willing to die for her. I'll go take care of this.
Yeah.
But most people don't have a daughter in a third world country prison, thank God. But because of that, they don't have an answer to that question. They wait for problems to be the answer, and they don't pay attention to the problems that they could solve as human beings. What do you care about deeply enough that you would actually say, hey, I'll trade my life for that?
Okay. I've got another take. I feel like that question provides a focus, whereas the problems that naturally come up for the human experience
Yes.
are the confusing distraction. They're
Yes.
not the focus.
Yes.
So, where is your focus? Is your focus on what's really important and
Yes.
moving towards that? Was your focus on your problems, which really doesn't take you anywhere?
Exactly. Exactly. Well, it's back to my light bulb versus laser beam metaphor. We talked about how to open up the energy, but now where's the focus? And if you can answer the question, what am I willing to die for? You've got a laser beam. This is where we're going. We got all this energy. We got energy for the potency, and we're focusing it so it can actually do what it's meant to do, which is change the world for the better. But you got to know where you're aiming it.
So I'm going to embody a vulnerable, leadery, entrepreneur, powerful but also wobbly man.
Mm-hmm.
Do I have a laser beam in me? Do I?
Everybody does, 100%. Not everybody is tapped into it. Not everybody has a community that holds that standard. And I think that's what's one of the biggest things missing in the world today is that's not the standard of masculinity. That is not the standard of community. Most people are just trying to get by, maybe trying to succeed. But very few people are trying to answer the question, why am I on this planet? What would I die for? And if you're feeling like you don't have that, it's probably because you're not surrounded by people who say that's normal, who hold that as a standard.
Or have shown you what it looks like, feels like, sounds like, thinks like, the
Exactly.
model. Because we need to sometimes, well, oftentimes, maybe always is a big word though, see it in action sometimes to understand it, or see it embodied to say, oh, that's what that is. Or maybe I could do that too. If he
Yes.
can do it, maybe I can do it. That is the way that we learn. We learn through
Exactly.
each other.
Exactly that.
Okay. Well, I have one surprise for you.
Oh,
And
fantastic.
you're not literally not going to see this coming.
Okay, here we go.
So I'm shifting in my seat.
Uh-oh.
I've got something I hid down here and
Oh,
you literally don't know about it
oh my
and you
goodness.
still can't see it.
Oh my goodness. What
Okay.
are we doing?
What is going to happen?
Yeah.
Is it a confetti cannon? Maybe.
I'm ready.
You got your shields up.
Here we go. Pull out the confetti.
Wouldn't that be fun? I don't have a confetti gun, but now I kind of feel like I wish I did. Okay. So I was just in Kansas City,
Yeah.
and every October, I run an in person live event for my mastermind community, which are women that spend a year or more. We do 2 other virtual events, 1 in person event. It's like sacred to us. And it's a big event. It's like a big deal. And my team flies in. We have all of our women flying from America and Canada, and we all look forward to it very much. And they always have a name. This year's name was called, in brackets, and then generate. It's about generating, but also regenerating, which is like a life cycle. Yep, got it. That. And one of the activities we did on day 2 is we let go of something really painful and we wrapped it in lots and lots of compassionate, wise, healthy adult and energy. And then we gave it back to earth, the nature elements, fire, etc. And as a way to remember the wisdom that came from that hard event, those hard events are the birthplace of things that wouldn't have happened if we hadn't had that context. It's where we find the impetus to move forward. Every single woman got a tumble stone of tree jasper. And so I would like to give you this tumble stone of tree jasper as a way to honor your journey and your wisdom and all that you have alchemized, all your pain into what you've built, and now become the shining light for those who resonate with you and who are also seeking the answers to the questions that you once were seeking too. So this is for you.
Thank you.
You're
That's
welcome.
lovely.
Yes.
I love it. There's such a big person on like taking things as like anchors, like
Yes.
physical objects as
Yes.
anchors, because we cultivate those states we were talking about. And if you can take it and take something that reminds you of that state that's physical, like it brings you back to the moment. So that's super meaningful. Thank you.
You're very welcome. And on behalf of everybody listening, thank you so much for bringing your whole self here today and sharing what it's like to be you and what it's like to be in your community. We thoroughly enjoyed ourselves.
Thank you so much.
Right. Thank you for listening to this episode of Wisdom Stripes. Follow me on @MegTuoheyOfficial and leave a comment and review. I'm looking forward to meeting you here next time on Wisdom Stripes.